Hi, Stephen Odille Remmert here again, and we are going to be continuing a conversation that we started earlier in the week. And Odille, help me out because I realize
You haven't got
I don't have the
you haven't got the
knowledge.
topic in front of you. Yeah. So the
Something
subject
about guilt.
is we're going to be answering a comment that was left on our video that we did last week, and the topic is: do I need their forgiveness to
Mhm.
let go of my guilt? So before we answer that, before we go to that comment, I wanted to also thank Stacy, who commented on last week's video and made such an excellent point. She says this is an important conversation, and she says it reminds me of the difference between actually being guilty and feeling guilty, especially feeling guilty for something that we didn't even do. And that is so common. I know that well. I'm
Mhm.
sure you do as well. So thank you, Stacey, for that. It's such an excellent point. And also, Stacey is actually a Remmert method practitioner. So if you need help finding and changing negative childhood memories that are holding you back and at the root of your limiting beliefs, we can highly recommend Stacey. She's a brilliant coach and practitioner, and you can find her on our website under the practitioners page. And I'll also put that link in the description of this video.
Yeah,
So I know,
Odille,
Steve, that
yeah,
sorry.
no, I was just going to tack on because I know that they weren't necessarily comments, but I've also spoken with several people
Oh,
this week regarding our conversation on guilt, and had one-on-one conversations with people, and they appreciated um, our conversation with that. Um,
great.
so thanks, thanks for your comments on that, and yeah, go ahead with our first question
Yes.
or the question for today.
Absolutely. And I've just realized I know there's a glare on my glasses, which is why I usually take them off, but I've got to read this. Then I'll take them off. All right. Um, the comment that we want to answer today, the question we want to answer
Mm.
today. So it's a big thank you to at Amado Bravado, who left this following comment and question. Um, they say, I think something that makes guilt difficult to let go of is the aspect of thinking about the person who's been wronged. It feels wrong to let go of the guilt when the person I have wronged hasn't yet forgiven. It could fuel the bitterness and pain in the victim if the victim sees the perpetrator free of remorse, for example. And then they say, doesn't the context of active relationship complicate things? And so, thank you so much for that comment. This is a really good point. And, at first, when Steve and I first started talking about this and sort of thinking about this question, we were thinking, oh, yeah, that's a tricky one. We weren't really sure about how to answer that, or
So could
how
I
you
just
would
be
deal with something like that. Yeah.
could I just clarify that and say that I may have been a little triggered by that question?
Excuse me.
Sorry,
Yes, you
I
may
didn't
say
mean
that.
for the spit take there, but good timing, good timing.
But that's true. When we first started talking about
Mm,
this, I sort of started to see how I could help someone come up with a solution for this. But yes, so Steve
and I would
was.
say that that it took a while for me to kind of hone in on what it was, but I think that I'm somebody that really resonates or I've
Mhm,
had a lot of experience with being that person in that
mhm.
situation where I was feeling the guilt and they're not receiving the
Yes,
forgiveness. So
yes,
I think that for me, that I was aware of the echo of
mhm.
that pattern, that program for me, and it's like, ooh, this is a tough one
Yeah,
because
yeah,
um that it is such a a poignant issue, and I think that a lot of people experience
Absolutely.
that, right? So
Absolutely. And especially, like we were saying as well, some people don't feel guilty, but for those who, are genuinely good people and you make a mistake or you do something that you regret and you feel bad already, and if the other person is really hurt and um, you know, is not showing any kind of signs of getting around to forgiving you eventually, it can be really difficult. It's difficult enough to let go of guilt with forgiveness for many of us, never mind when we know that the other person is still suffering. So I hope that today's conversation will help with this. And what I'd
mhm,
like to do is I'd like to use an example of a situation where this may that I think can be it can be quite relatable, and I think
mhm.
many people have dealt with it from either side or both sides. And I'd like to start by looking through the eyes of the person who has done the thing and is feeling guilty, and then switch around to look through the eyes of the victim, the person who is perhaps not able to forgive, and just see if we can find something that will be healthy and beneficial for both parties, from both sides, for those who are willing and looking for something like that. So, looking through the eyes of the person who has done the thing. So, the example that I think can be quite handy to use, because it's a situation where this happens and where it can be really difficult to get over or get through,
Yeah.
in the situation of a relationship. So let's say it's a relationship where one person where let's say it's a relationship where I've cheated. So I've cheated on my partner, and I feel really bad about it. It was a mistake. I've apologized, and my partner is, excuse me, really hurt, and can't bring themselves to forgive me. So obviously that's a difficult situation. Number one, it's natural to feel guilty and remorseful. That is a human thing. So we're not suggesting we're not suggesting that you shouldn't feel guilty. Of course you feel guilty. The difference is going to be whether excuse me, you're able to feel guilty and then overcome that and move forward, or if you are eaten up by the guilt and you can't get past it. And that for me is what makes the difference, because being stuck in the guilt and unable to let it go is not helping the other person. It's not undoing what already happened. And it's keeping you from actually being a productive member of society or helping others or being creative. And it'll affect your health and all sorts of other areas of your life. So, but now we look at the other person, and one of the things the comment said is it can make the bitterness and the pain worse for the other person if they look at the perpetrator and see they're not remorseful. So that's a really good point. And what I would say is there's a difference between um, being, overcoming the guilt and letting that go, and just being, well, I don't care, I'm just getting on with my life. There's an in between there. And so what we want to aim for is that there's still concern and caring, and replacing the guilt with unconditional love. And I'll explain how that helps shortly. Did you want to say anything before? I know that I tend to get on a roll.
Yeah. Well, I think that in remembering the wording, and I know you've got the wording of that question there in front of you, but it's recognizing that in interpersonal relationships, it's always going to be complicated, and there's a lot of stuff going on here, and I know that we're just picking a an example to
Hmm.
use at
Yeah.
this, and I guess maybe something that may be a bit helpful right now is just setting out a little bit of a spoiler alert, in that really this is about understanding that guilt isn't an empowering
Right.
feeling to be holding on to.
Yes.
So we're kind of
Yes.
exploring this from both sides, but uh, ultimately getting to that place of understanding that guilt is not something that is going to be helping the situation.
Yes, exactly. And so when you've got these two people, um, and the person who's done the thing that they feel guilty about, let's say they do continue to feel guilty and show remorse because they feel like maybe that will help this other person feel better or show them that I care. From the other person's point of view, the first thing that I want to just put this in because I thought this was a really important point. So if you're feeling like I can't let go of the guilt because this person hasn't forgiven me, expecting or needing or wanting the other person to forgive me is putting pressure on that person. So I've done whatever it is, the thing that I feel bad about, and I'm wanting forgiveness from this person. And compare that to this alternative. I feel bad because I did the thing. I've apologized. I've explained perhaps, it was a mistake. I shouldn't have done it. And then instead of wanting forgiveness from this person, I do two main things. The first thing I do is I make a plan for what I can do moving forward so that I make sure I don't do it again, if that's applicable. So, in other words, the next time I find this is my plan, the next time I find myself in this situation, this is what I'm going to do things differently, or this is the choice I'm going to make next time, and this is how I'm going to make sure that I remember or that I choose something different or whatever. In other words, being putting together a strategic plan for moving forward to help reassure that other person, if that's applicable to the situation, is going to be a lot more effective than just feeling guilty. So there's that, number one. And then number two, I love that person unconditionally. Now, of course, in order to love that person unconditionally, I need to first love myself unconditionally. So it starts in me. So I need to, instead of wanting forgiveness from that person, I'm going to take the responsibility of of giving myself that forgiveness so that they don't have to. So I think that looking at it that way, so I'm going to give myself forgiveness because I did what I did at the time with what I had. That's already done. I can't go back and change it. So moving forward, I forgive myself because next time I'm going to do something different, and I'm always doing the best I can with what I have. That's the second thing. Now I'm going to use the unconditional love technique. And for those of you who aren't sure about that, it was two videos before this, two lives before this. Um, you can check that video and go to the end of the video for the little exercise that is kind of the beginner's exercise for that. And so I'm going to use the unconditional love technique to first of all fill myself with unconditional love. And then I'm going to love this other person unconditionally, meaning I don't need them to forgive me. I'm not expecting anything from them. I am just going to love. That, I think, is going to be so much more useful and helpful for that person than me sitting over here feeling guilty and expecting or wanting or needing something from them, needing permission from them, needing forgiveness from them, needing them to give me something. So in other words, depending on the situation, depending on the relationship, and all of that, I'm going to express my love for this person without needing anything in return, without needing them to love me back, without needing them to reciprocate, without needing them to thank me. That is going to be so much more powerful, I think.
Yeah, and I know that that we're just kind of creating an example with
Hmm.
this. I also recognize that there are endless examples of other things that could be at play right now, and I'm just thinking, for my own from my own personal experience, having been in uh, a relationship, with somebody who was kind of high on that scale of narcissistic behavior,
Mhm.
and that type of a relationship can, you know, so I'm just
Mhm.
aware, I'm just putting it out there that what you're saying, or what you're proposing is kind of an ideal situation, and that every circumstance is going to have its own unique characteristics. And sometimes it can feel like that doesn't feel like a safe thing to do, or that doesn't feel like that's something that I can engage in. Does that make sense in what I'm saying? It's like sometimes the relationship dynamics, or it
Yeah,
this is not a
I
one
get what
size fits all type of example that you're putting out there.
right. But I do think that that going to forgiving yourself and
Hmm.
getting into the state of unconditional love first for yourself and then for the other person and the situation is going to, I could be wrong about this, but from off the top of my head, I think that's going to still be the most empowering thing to do, regardless of what the situation is. So let's say I'm in a relationship with someone who is displaying narcissistic behavior. And so let's say they're controlling or they're guilt tripping me, perhaps, they're trying to make me feel bad, worse than, what
Yeah,
I did or whatever the
right.
situation is. And so let's say they're manipulative.
Yeah.
Me being so me going into myself and going, okay, I forgive me because I did the best I could, etc., everything that I've just said. And I am filling myself with unconditional love for myself anyway, regardless of what I do or did or anything. And now I'm aiming that love, that power, that light. And this probably will only make real sense knowing the way we teach unconditional love, that it's a power, not an emotion. Aiming
Hmm.
that power, shining that light into darkness. So aiming it at that person, filling them with that light, that love, that power, not giving them the power, I mean shining it into them.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that is going to diffuse any manipulation because I can't be manipulated if I'm in a state of unconditional love.
Yes, and that's a really good point. And I would say that yes, that works, but I will also say, again, from my own personal experience, that that wasn't where I was at, you
Right?
know, and understanding that, and this is a little bit more complex and it's likely a video for another day, but understanding that, you know, we can end up in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
We end up in relationships with manipulative people or narcissistic people
Sure.
because we have previous
Yeah.
childhood references that
Right.
propel us in that direction. So for me, and I know I talked a little bit about it on the previous video, that early childhood feeling, that early childhood experience of guilt is just a part of who I am. That I learned early on that feeling of guilt, or there's something wrong with me, in that guilty sense, that's what I'm bringing to a relationship. So then if I'm then it was easy to be in a relationship with somebody who was a manipulator, who saw, oh, here's an easy mark, that
Mm-hmm.
here's somebody that I can manipulate because they're going to be
Right.
feeling responsible or guilty for everything. So I didn't mean
Yeah.
to, I didn't want to take
No,
that
you're
off
right.
too much on a tangent there, but I'm just recognizing from my own personal experience that
Absolutely.
uh, it's a difficult place to imagine that I
Mm-hmm.
could forgive myself, that I could love myself. And it's like, yes, that's eventually what helped. for me to heal and to be able to make that transformation.
Yeah,
But that wasn't the starting point. You know,
absolutely. Yeah.
that recognizing that all of that guilt that I was feeling and all of those issues that I was dealing with, ultimately, I had to go back and to heal and to love myself. So
Yes, and
I
thank
feel,
you,
yeah,
Steve, for sharing that.
yeah.
And you're absolutely right. And um, the key here is recognizing that. So this brings us to how do we do it? So now we know. Hopefully, we've answered the question of you know, how can you, the reason for being able to let go of the guilt even when the other person hasn't forgiven you, because re- replacing the
Hmm.
guilt with unconditional love, giving yourself the forgiveness instead of expecting it from the other person, all of that hopefully gives you the reason. Now that, let's say, there's a person saying, okay, that makes sense. Now, how do I do it? So
Hmm.
here's the how.
Hmm.
So the first thing is using that little that little technique, that little beginner's exercise that we gave you in the two lives ago, two YouTube lives ago, the unconditional love thing. That beginner's exercise, practicing that over and over for all the reasons we gave during that video, will start. That's the first stage, the beginning of it, and then going through the process of developing that skill into the power of unconditional love. So being able to use it as a power as opposed to an emotion.
Hmm.
And for that, there's the book, You Have a Superpower. I'll put the link in the thing below. If anyone actually would want more on that technique, let us know and we can do more videos on that as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, very importantly, at the same time, the other piece of this is checking your childhood for where you learned. So when we feel guilty now, as I say, feeling guilty is it's a normal human reaction, of course, when you've done something that hurt someone else or that you feel you've wronged someone in some way. Natural, normal to feel the guilt, but it's also natural, normal, and healthy to then move beyond it. To then, it's like you bump into someone, you go, oh, sorry, and then you move on. It's that kind of feeling. You mean it, but you also don't have to sit down, pitch a tent, and spend time, you know, going over how terrible it is, because it, apart from not feeling nice, apart from the fact that it feels awful, it affects health, relationships. There are children who will become different adults, able to achieve different things because a parent was able to get beyond guilt. That's how important I think this is. So, in other words, if someone who is currently stuck in guilt is able to let go of it and move forward, move beyond it, it affects physical health, it affects their relationships with other people. There are, work colleagues who could, be uplifted by a person. There are all kinds of knock-on effects, ripple effects. So what happens right now, if you find you are unable to let go of the guilt, and replace it with unconditional love, despite knowing that it would be beneficial and it would help all round, that means it's the cause of the guilt is not the thing you did or didn't do or whatever. It's not about now. It's coming from childhood references. So, in other words, your brain is referring to implicit memories in your childhood where you learned that you learned how that you should feel guilty. You learned what it is to feel guilty. You perhaps learned there is no, what we were saying in the last live we did. This is a debt that will never be paid, never be repaid. And you may not even know where it originally started, and that's okay. You go with the earliest that you can remember. So you find those childhood references and change those references in the unconscious part for the unconscious part of your brain, so that there is no longer proof that you should suffer, you should be punished because you're guilty, beyond what you could ever make up for. And if you need help with that, we have, I wanted to mention, we have practitioners, Remmert method practitioners who are certified and trained by us. You can find them on our website. I'll put a link to that in the description of this video. And they can help you find and change those memories. So that's how, so it's the unconditional love and then finding and changing the original roots of the guilt. And
Hmm.
then what you're changing it to is not to someone who doesn't care anymore, but to someone who cares enough to actually, number one, take practical steps to make up for it or do what you can or help others instead or whatever you can do. And number two, love unconditionally, which is going to then not only be healthier for you, but also affect your impact on other people.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that that process, engaging in that, everything that you just kind of laid out there, because I know, and you know, not we don't need to go into that right now, but you know, that that level of guilt that I was living in,
Yes.
as when we met, as I was kind of
Yeah.
going through some of this, and for me, starting out at that point, imagining being in that place of unconditional love for the other person and for myself, that seemed like an impossibility.
Absolutely.
It
Yes.
absolutely seemed like an impossibility.
You can't
That
see it from
I
there.
think it was a lifelong belief or a lifelong pattern of
Mm.
not being able to love myself as a starting point. And of course, the entire process is about building that.
Hmm.
But when I was able to get to that point of being able to send unconditional love, be in that place of unconditional love for the situation, for the person, it was almost magical to
Yes.
watch the transformations happening. First of all, I was able to start to experience for the first time in my life that feeling of the possibility of being able to
Hmm.
love myself for one, which felt incredibly different or strange. And then, the watching how the the unexpected things started happening. That's the part that feels um,
Yes.
magical, or it feels I don't know what word I'm looking for here, but I know that we try to stay in that place of being able to explain things physiologically and having some scientific evidence behind it. But as you're engaging in doing this, and it's like,
Yeah.
how do I know I'm actually sending unconditional love to somebody? But being in that state of feeling it and imagining it, and then having the unexpected things happening, people softening, people connecting, people, and it's like, how is this happening? How is this possible? So, but, I sort of feel like my own vulnerability here, it's kind of um, clouding my ability to put a sentence together. But I just the
Yeah.
the the process, that process of going through that process to be able to find the patterns, to be able to find what it was in childhood that created this sense of not being able to love myself, this sense of guilt, and transforming that and then being able to apply that in real life relationship issues,
Yeah.
um, is is amazing. So I guess I'm just kind of putting that out there because I do feel like I was kind of a poster child for this can't work.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
I'm still not exactly sure. No, I get it. I understand. And that is the process. So it's a both and type of
Yeah.
experience that engaging in understanding and learning how to develop the practice of unconditional
Mhm.
love, that it's a
Yep.
skill, that it is that we're creating that emotional or that state within. I know we
Mhm.
say it's not an emotion, but we're
Yeah.
creating the ability to hold that state.
Hmm.
And also going back and looking at those childhood references that were the
Hmm.
foundation
Yeah.
of our belief system and how we think the world works. Those two things together are incredibly important. Sorry, I may have gotten on a bit of a rant there, but help me weave that back together. How's that fit into
Well,
the
I think you
question?
I think that was fabulous that you were willing to share some of that vulnerability, as you said, and because it does help to hear, real life examples, of course. So I want to say that I think we've pretty much covered it all now, but I would love for you know those who are watching, if you we'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. What do you think about it? Have you had experience of this? Um, and what would you like us to talk about next? So we
Mm,
can do
mm.
deeper dives on this topic for different scenarios, guilt in different scenarios or different relationships. We can also take a dive into things like dealing with narcissists. I know that's quite a big topic that a
Yeah.
lot of people deal with. Let us know what you'd like us to explore and discuss, and what questions you have, and that kind of thing. And I think that's everything I have to say for today.
Yeah. No,
So
yeah, and we do appreciate those comments, and we do read all comments, and
yeah,
we'll answer either live in these calls or directly, via emails or responses, not emails, but responses in the comment section
yeah.
on the videos. So,
And thank you so much again, Stacy, and at Amado Bravado. Thank you so much again. We so appreciate those comments and the topic suggestions. All right.
and we are we're setting the intention to be back again live next Tuesday, this coming
Mhm.
Tuesday. So
Yes.
until then, have a wonderful
Rest of your
time.
week
Have a
and
wonderful
weekend.
weekend until we